Winnie-the-Pooh is that silly old bear created by English author A.A. Milne in 1926. An instant global phenomenon, Pooh and his friends from the 100 Acre Wood, based on the toys of Milne's son, Christopher Robin, immediately saw various media adaptations, including one alongside Hollywood starlet Shirley Temple and an unauthorized Soviet Russia cartoon series, before Walt Disney adapted the stories into animation in the 1960s, turning Winnie-the-Pooh into one of Disney's most popular and lucrative franchises. In 2021, Winnie-the-Pooh celebrates 95 years, and to help him, I will trace his entire evolution from 1926 to now, looking at his entire history and discussing design, personality, and thematic changes across nearly 100 years of stories, films, and TV series. In this edition of Explaining Disney. At only 24 years of age, Alan Alexander Milne, better known as A.A. Milne, was employed as a staff writer and assistant editor at satirical magazine Punch, for which he wrote, as noted by the Encyclopaedia Britannica, many humorous verse and whimsical essays. Following a stint in the British Army during World War I, Milne wrote propaganda articles for the War Office's MI7, and upon discharge in 1919, turned to dramatic writing, by his early 40s, establishing himself as a prolific and critically acclaimed novelist, playwright, and screenwriter. In August of 1920, Milne's wife Daphne gave birth to their only child, Christopher Robin Milne. Milne turned to writing light verse poems and nursery rhymes for his son, many of which incorporating him into their stories. Milne's first stories were published in Punch, accompanied by illustrations by resident artist E.H. Shephard. When they proved successful, they were subsequently collected in the 1924 children's book When We Were Very Young. The most notable poem from this collection was Teddy Bear, the story of a short and fat teddy bear named Mr. Edward Bear, inspired by one of Christopher's favourite toys. In fact, Christopher had several favourite toys, also including Piglet the pig, Tigger the tiger, Eeyore the donkey, and a mother and child kangaroo pair named Kanga and Roo. Following the success of When We Were Very Young, Milne published a short story collection titled Winnie-the-Pooh in 1926. The book was titled after Christopher's bear, who he'd recently renamed Winnie after a black bear who was a popular resident of the London Zoo. Winnie had been left at the zoo by Canadian soldier Harry Colburn, who'd rescued her and named her after his home city of Winnipeg, Manitoba during World War I. The Pooh portion was taken from a name Christopher had given to a swan he regularly fed during a family holiday. Milne noted in the book's introduction, "When we said goodbye, we took the name with us, as we didn't think the swan would want it anymore." The book specifically collected tales of Christopher Robin, Pooh, and the other toys, all of whom came to life in the enchanted 100 Acre Wood, inspired by Ashdown Forest, nearby Milne's East Sussex woodland cottage, where the real-life Christopher played with his toys. While Tigger didn't make an appearance in this book, two characters were created for it, a rabbit named Rabbit, and an owl named Owl, whom Milne would call his own unaided work. The book was again beautifully decorated by Shephard, with now iconic crosshatch etchings, establishing the look and design of the characters and their playground. These whimsical stories of childlike innocence quickly captured the imagination of British children during the dark days which followed the war, with the book selling over 50,000 copies in its first 8 weeks in Britain, and a further 150,000 in its first year in the USA. Pooh became an instant cultural phenomenon, and Milne and Shephard collaborated on 2 further books, Now We Are 6, in which Pooh and friends appeared in 11 of 35 collected verses, and 1928's The House at Pooh Corner, a Winnie-the-Pooh sequel likewise solely collecting Pooh-centric stories, which finally introduced Tigger into text. In 1928, due to continued popularity, Milne penned a stage play titled Winnie-the-Pooh Party, presented as a one-off charity performance in London. And in 1931, the popular Sue Hastings marionettes staged performances in New York. The UK's BBC presented a radio play in 1926, and the Columbia Broadcasting System presented one in the USA in 1932. Likewise, records featuring the stories were pressed as early as 1932. Notable early recordings included a 1951 story reading by American actor Jimmy Stewart and a 1956 reading by British performer Maurice Evans. In fact, one 1930s vinyl release, Winnie-the-Pooh Songs, featured the first colour artwork of the characters, with US merchandiser and father of the licensing industry, Stephen Schlesinger, giving Pooh yellow fur and a red shirt. This look quickly became the standard and was featured across various merchandise throughout the 30s and 40s. When Shephard's illustrations were colorized in the 70s, this iconic look was depicted in the books for the first time. In the 40s, the stories were more popular than ever, and Christopher Robin Milne's original toys toured the USA, insured for $50,000, close to $1 million in today's dollars, and eventually found residency in New York City, where they remain today. In 1952, Pooh made the jump to moving pictures in a puppetry series produced for BBC television. Considered lost media, all that remains of the program is this image. Radio Times magazine at the time described it as a series of programs based on the Milne stories, with at least 6 episodes adapting various passages from the books. In 1960, Pooh and the gang appeared in a special episode of NBC's Shirley Temple's storybook, which similarly adapted numerous Pooh stories into live action for American audiences. All the classic characters appeared throughout the hour-long production, enacted by marionette puppets made and operated by Bill and Cora Bard. They were voiced by Franz Fazakas, who would later go on to work for the Jim Henson Company, and lend his name to another famous bear, the Muppets' Fozzie. Thanks to the global leader of family entertainment, Pooh soon made a more substantial leap to the screen. Walt Disney had in fact been trying to get his hands on story and character rights to Pooh for decades, first approaching Milne's agents in 1938 when looking for popular stories to adapt following the success of his first animated feature, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. But it wasn't until 1961, 5 years after Milne's passing, that Disney was able to secure them from the Milne estate. It took a further 3 years to break a deal with Schlesinger for US merchandising rights, and production on Disney's proposed Pooh feature was delayed until 1964. Once storyboarding had begun, Disney realized that perhaps Milne's stories didn't work in the format. John Corley, ex-Disney archivist, noted that Disney felt the stories were too light and whimsical, while author and historian Brian Sibley observed Disney was concerned that they didn't easily provide the characteristic plot essentials usually found in his features, romance and drama, with some element of peril and the inevitable threat of a villain. So instead of a feature film, Walt settled on creating a featurette, a 25-minute extended short that could run before a feature in theatres. If this performed well with audiences, he could return to a feature at a later date, treating the featurette as a prelude. To form the featurette's basis, Walt took the first third of his planned movie, based on the first 2 chapters of Winnie-the-Pooh, and titled it Winnie-the-Pooh and the Honey Tree, even removing the hyphens from the name. Disney wanted to stay true to the ideals, tones and spirit presented in Milne's books, as well as to the visual style of Shephard's illustrations, something he paid special attention to following the backlash from British audiences who believed his 1951 Alice in Wonderland was too Americanized and unfaithful to Lewis Carroll's stories. Disney wanted to keep characters visually similar, though animators found that the one-dimensional crosshatch etchings of the books didn't translate well to a 3-dimensional space. As such, they were made a little rounder, so they could be moved in more flexible positions and shown at various angles. To compensate, animators employed inking techniques to give backgrounds a crosshatch feel, inspired by, in Sibley's words, the symbiotic relationship between Milne's writings and Shephard's line illustrations. The stories were told through the physical medium of the books, with characters moving through pages and interacting with text. Regardless, artist Ralph Wright noted that Disney Disney still wanted the features to be understandable to the American audience, so gave story and animation duties to artists who weren't fans of the books, fearing that those who were would stay too true to the source and not be receptive to slightly Americanizing and Disneyfying the featurette. The team ultimately worked on small departures, including the addition of gags that wouldn't feel out of place in Disney's comedic cartoon shorts, and brand new songs by studio songsmiths Robert and Richard Sherman. Most controversially, however, Disney added a gopher with a thick Southern American accent to the cast, and hired an American child, Bruce Reitherman, son of the film's director Wolfgang Wooly Reitherman, as the voice of Christopher Robin. Bringing life to Pooh was American actor and Disney regular Sterling Holloway, who crafted the character's trademark silky smooth vocalization. When the featurette was released in 1966 alongside live-action feature The Ugly Dachshund, Walt's fears were realised, with British press not too favourable of it. One critic from The Mail described it as an extraordinary attack on one of the last proud remnants of the British Empire, and Shephard himself called it a complete travesty. Critics complained that Disney managed to add an American gopher but couldn't find space for Piglet or Tigger. One critic's campaign to have Christopher Robin redubbed by a British child proved successful, as the film was recalled from Britain and reworked before wide release. Regardless, it was a hit with audiences, and soon after, Pooh was even introduced to the Disney parks as a creepy roaming character. Shortly before his death that year, Disney greenlit a second featurette, which ultimately became the studio's first production without him. Winnie-the-Pooh and the Blustery Day utilised the second part of Disney's planned featurette and was based on 7 stories from across both Pooh books. Reitherman now oversaw production, and in an attempt to be more faithful, placed Milne fans on the story team, hired British child John Walmsley to play Christopher Robin, found space for Piglet and Tigger, and demoted Gopher to a small cameo. On release in 1968, alongside live-action feature The Horse in the Grey Flannel Suit, the featurette was an incredible success, even with the British, and won that year's Academy Award for Best Animated Short Film. Its success cemented Winnie-the-Pooh as synonymous with the Disney brand. However, another non-Disney Pooh production spawned a year later in Communist Russia. Having only recently allowed publication of the books, Pooh was a new sensation in the Soviet Union, and officials approved production of a series of unauthorized cartoon adaptations. Produced in a cheap, limited style, animator Fyodor Kitruk at Soyuzmot Film Studios brought a scrappiness to their 3 Winnie-Pooh shorts, released between 1969 and 1972. The art design was an enormous departure from both the Disney and Milne iterations, with messy, childlike, crayon-drawn backgrounds, though historian Kevin Scott Collier noted that these appeared amateurish, but were actually imaginative works of art. Characters were likewise garish. Pooh was stumpy and brown-furred, looking more like a red panda than a bear. Even his personality was changed from friendly, charming and placid to rude, arrogant and aggressive. The other classic characters likewise bore no resemblance to Disney's or Shephard's. Filmmakers stuck behind the Iron Curtain had actually never even seen the Disney version, so were at no risk of ripping it off. The cartoons were loosely based on Milne's stories, though instead of being stuffed toys, characters were depicted as living creatures, and no humans, not even Christopher Robin, were anywhere to be seen. Due to their unlawful nature, the Winnie-Pooh bootlegs were never officially distributed outside of the Soviet Union, though in recent years have surfaced online and become a strangely appreciated curio. In 1974, Disney released a third Pooh featurette titled Winnie-the-Pooh and Tigger 2, which adapted a further 3 original Pooh tales and was attached to the release of live-action feature The Island at the Top of the World. 3 years later, in 1977, Disney packaged all 3 features into The Many Adventures of Winnie-the-Pooh, finally achieving Walt's dream of a feature-length Pooh film. To create a consistent narrative, the story team presented the 3 featurettes in full, linked by newly animated sequences, which framed the shorts as chapters within a Pooh book, borrowing the style of the original shorts. In addition to these links, the final chapter from House at Pooh Corner was added as a short postscript, which saw Christopher Robin bidding farewell to Pooh and his childhood. Animators had actually always wanted to adapt this sequence, but felt it would make the featurettes seem too closed-ended. With the framing devices and new ending, the featurettes blended and rounded out so perfectly that it's almost as if filmmakers had planned them to be combined this way all along. Some have even suggested that this is exactly what Walt had intended. Despite the finality of the film, in 1981 Disney released Winnie-the-Pooh Discovers the Seasons, a 9-minute educational short created by the studio's educational media division. Featuring all of the classic characters, it was produced in the same tried and tested style as the previous productions. In the short, Christopher Robin teaches his pals about the seasons in Disney's very first original Pooh story. Like many of the educational films from the era, animation was outsourced for the sake of cheaper production and faster turnaround, certainly notable in its somewhat limited style. Disney was so happy with the work done by Reinhardt Productions, however, that they commissioned the studio to produce a 4th theatrical Pooh featurette, 1983's Winnie-the-Pooh and a Day for Eeyore, which released alongside Sword in the Stone. Much like previous featurettes, this one drew from Milne's Pooh books, adapting 2 stories. It was the first theatrical Disney cartoon to be outsourced to another studio in over 40 years, and was the final theatrical Pooh featurette. That same year, the first Pooh TV series debuted as one of 6 originals to air on the Disney Channel's launch day. Welcome to Pooh Corner was also Disney's first live-action Pooh production, a half-hour puppetry series with characters portrayed by actors in animatronic suits. This educational program featured brand new Pooh stories, musical segments with songs by the Shermans, and arts and crafts tutorials. It ran until late 1984 for 120 episodes, and was, at the time, the highest rated Disney Channel show. A series of educational specials followed between 1985 and 1989, most notably 1985's Too Smart for Strangers. 1988, however, saw the debut of The New Adventures of Winnie-the-Pooh, a series produced for ABC, not owned by Disney at the time, when the network desperately wanted a Disney cartoon for their Saturday morning block, where they'd been consistently lowest in the ratings. Produced by Disney Television Animation, it was the first Saturday morning series headlined by a major Disney character, and Disney's first animated series based on a classic animated film. Dropping the formula of the previous productions, New Adventures told brand new stories that aimed to educate children about life, friendship, and responsibility, additionally teaching how to overcome obstacles and fears. Disney described the series as offering storytelling rich in language and values, as well as delightful, well-acted characters, with action-adventure sequences and moments of whimsy infused into the educational narratives. Overall, the series was heavily Americanized, with Christopher Robin presented as a typical 80s American kid, stories featuring strong American ideals and values, and the setting shifted to contemporary America. Regardless, writing staff respectfully treated the 100 Acre Wood as a timeless Never Never Land, and made sure to keep the integrity of the characters by depicting them in their classic designs and personalities. That said, Gopher was back again in a more predominant role than ever. The series was an incredibly worthy companion to the originals and earned high acclaim from viewers and critics, winning 2 Daytime Emmy Awards for Outstanding Animated Program and 2 Humanitas Prizes. With the series, Disney hoped to set new standards of excellence in Saturday morning television, moving away from the format's usual limited animation style, and instead utilising more drawings per minute than any other at the time. In fact, almost double. The St. Petersburg Times called it television animation at its very finest, noting it to be more comparable to big screen rather than television animation. Naturally, the series was practically indistinguishable from the classic featurettes visually, despite animation being outsourced to various offshore studios. The series ran until 1991 for 50 episodes consisting of 82 segments, and ran in syndication continually for almost 20 years. Additionally, a series of holiday-themed television specials aired between 1991 and 1999. New Adventures kickstarted an enormous Pooh resurgence over the next decade, in effect spawning the company's second largest multimedia franchise next to only Mickey Mouse. To many, the show is the most iconic and beloved Disney Pooh production, not least of all for introducing Jim Cummings as the new voice of Pooh, a role he still inhabits 33 years on. Throughout this prolific period, Disney's second feature animation division, Disney Toon Studios, produced 8 Winnie-the-Pooh feature films, 2 of the earliest of which were direct follow-ups to New Adventures. 1999's Seasons of Giving simply repackaged the Thanksgiving special and 2 other holiday-themed episodes, while 2002's A Very Merry Pooh Year acted as a 60-minute Christmas-themed series finale. A further 3 original movies were released direct-to-video, while 3 were given fully-fledged theatrical runs. Set outside the New Adventures continuity, these movies were a cross between the child-aimed storytelling of the series and the more adventurous narratives of the original featurettes. As time passed, however, the studio geared them towards younger and younger audiences, as the Pooh brand slowly became known as entry-level Disney. Taking a more traditional approach, these movies returned the stories to England, and in the ones where he actually appeared in a speaking role, gave Christopher Robin a British accent again. While character designs remained the same, only the first 2 films, Grand Adventure and the Tigger movie, made an effort to emulate the traditional etched backgrounds, with the later films becoming cleaner and more modern in their designs. Likewise, only the Tigger movie and Springtime with Roo borrowed these storybook framing devices. A major introduction in this series was Lumpy the Heffalump, who made his first appearance in Pooh's Heffalump movie. While these are all of varying quality, most are treasured entries in the Pooh franchise to those who grew up with them. Throughout this period, Pooh also made numerous cameo appearances on House of Mouse, as an audience member at Mickey's Club, where he was even once dragged on stage. Additionally, a Pooh dark ride attraction opened in Magic Kingdom Park at Walt Disney World Orlando in 1999, after various failed attempts to build one at Anaheim's Disneyland since the 1970s. The attraction later opened at various other Disney parks around the world, including Disneyland. In 2006, Pooh was graced with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, making him one of only 21 fictional entities to be given one. In line with Disney now treating Pooh as a preschool franchise, the early 2000s saw the character star in 2 television series for Playhouse Disney, later Disney Junior. First was The Book of Pooh, a puppetry series which saw the characters as puppets acted out in front of green screen, with virtual backgrounds designed to look like paper cutouts. The series was produced by Shadow Projects, the team behind Bear in the Big Blue House, and told simplistic, moral-driven stories presented as if from a Pooh storybook. It ran between 2001 and 2004 for 51 episodes, and additionally spawned a direct-to-video movie in 2001. Then, in 2007, the gang returned in My Friends Tigger and Pooh, the first ever computer-animated Pooh production. This series saw the most major deviation from the traditional storytelling, with Pooh and Tigger forming a detective team with their new friend, 6-year-old Darby, voiced by Chloe Grace Moretz. Christopher Robin only appeared twice throughout the series' entire 3-year, 63-episode run. Here, Lumpy was also solidified as a core cast member of the franchise. Ranking at number 1 in its demographic of 2 to 5-year-olds throughout most of its run, the series was a hit and spawned 3 of its own direct-to-video features until it concluded in 2010. In late 2009, with the instatement of Pixar's John Lasseter and Ed Catmull as heads of Walt Disney Animation, and at the insistence of recently named CEO Bob Iger, another major Pooh feature was put into production, the first from Disney Animation's main division for over 30 years. As the previous administration had moved to a strictly computer-generated workflow, the new team had a desire to bring back traditional hand-drawn animation. Cartmel noted, "We wanted Disney Animation to return to what had made them great." Winnie-the-Pooh, released in 2011, was a direct sequel to Many Adventures, aiming to ignore everything that came after. Disney wanted to return Pooh to his roots by taking equal inspiration from Disney's featurettes and Milne's stories, 3 of which were chosen to form its basis. Directors Stephen J. Anderson and Don Hall noted that they wanted to emulate the charm, heart, and humour of the featurettes, while also updating some aspects to deliver broad audience material for viewers of all ages. However, they were adamant to keep it classic and timeless, insisting that backgrounds be drawn on paper and coloured with traditional watercolours to embrace and maintain the traditional style. Storybook bookends were once again utilised, and the story remained set in England. Though critically praised, cinemagoers weren't entirely receptive, with the film only making $50 million at the global box office. Pooh was somewhat of an anomaly at this point. Disney's marketing team clearly couldn't find a way to prove to general audiences that the new movie was any different than the saccharine Disney Toon Pooh movies or series released over the last 15 years, and generally struggled to market it. Of course, opening it against Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, at the time the 3rd highest grossing movie of all time, wasn't an incredibly bright move. While Pooh was set to mark the grand return of the traditional feature animation at Disney, 10 years later, it remains their last. To coincide with the movie's 2011 DVD release, a series of mini-adventures were released, which repurposed clips from earlier Pooh productions as 3 to 4 minute short films, featuring new narration by John Cleese, who also narrated the film. In 2017, Pooh made an extended guest appearance in Disney Junior's Doc McStuffins episode Into the 100 Acre Wood, which saw McStuffins attending to him after a runaway balloon incident results in a minor injury. The various Pooh characters also appeared, all depicted in a smooth CG animated style. 2017 also saw Fox Searchlight Pictures release Goodbye Christopher Robin, a biographical film focused on A.A. Milne's inception of the Pooh books and their eventual impact on the upbringing of his son. Here, Milne was portrayed by Domhnall Gleeson and also starred Margot Robbie as his wife Daphne and Will Tilston and Alex Lawther as Christopher Robin Milne. The following year saw Disney release another live-action Christopher Robin film, however one stooped more so in fantasy. Here, Ewan McGregor portrayed an aged and embittered Robin, who during a period of major uncertainty finds himself transported back to the 100 Acre Wood, where he reunites with Pooh and friends, all featured as computer-generated characters. Designed as another direct sequel to Many Adventures, the film was an entry in Disney's lucrative franchise of live-action reimaginings, and utilised much of the classic iconography. Here, the Pooh animals were designed after Milne's real-life dolls, bridging the gap between fact and fiction. Disney described the film as having strong elements of magical realism, seeking to tell an emotional journey with heartwarming adventure. It also tackled themes of mental health, asking whether Pooh and friends were actually real all along, or simply just figments of Christopher Robin's imagination. Geared more towards adult audiences, Christopher Robin's darker, somewhat depressing tone was a huge departure for the franchise, likewise failing to find a substantial audience. While it made close to $200 million at the box office, this was far from the typical $1 billion Disney's live-action franchise films were known to make at the time. While Christopher Robin is currently the last Disney Pooh film or TV production, Pooh made a brief appearance in Disney-sanctioned Simpsons parody short Plusaversary, where he joined a roster of Disney characters and Springfieldians to celebrate the 2nd anniversary of the Disney Plus streaming service. Meanwhile, November 21 saw the opening of Disney's Winnie-the-Pooh, the new musical stage adaptation on Broadway, The production, with book by Jonathan Rockefeller and original Sherman Brothers songs, is described as a beautiful, fresh stage adaptation, told with stunning life-sized puppetry through the eyes of the characters we all know and love, in a new story from the 100 Acre Wood. Opening to largely positive reception and breaking advanced box office records, the show looks to be a mainstay on New York stages for many years to come. With new authorized Pooh stories being published in recent years, and with Disney continuing to use him in various media and productions, the legacy of this silly old bear is set to live on into the far distant future. But wherever we go and whatever happens to us on the way, in that enchanted place on top of the forest, a little boy and his bear will always be playing. Hey everyone, if you haven't yet, smash that big old subscribe button up on your screen to keep up to date with all my content, and hit that like button down below. Also, don't forget to check me out on social media, and please consider supporting me over on Patreon for as little as $1 a month for exclusive videos, early access content, and to get your name up on the screen. Thanks again for watching.